And then let's check the video feed. F5. Let's see if this is working. No, it still says waiting for other Bruce. I wonder what that is about. Live event.
Well, you said there was delay.
Bum, bum, bum. Whoop, we're going.
Okay.
Yep, we are on YouTube. We've been elapsed for 37 seconds, apparently.
Oh, I still doesn't work for me, but hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Let's try this. For some reason, oh, it's not streaming to my event. We have. How do we do this? God damn it, YouTube. Why do you have to make everything so easy but so difficult? Control C. I'm just going to try do something for a moment.
Okay.
Do me a quick favor. Can you guys follow that link there? I just sent it in on our group chat.
Okay, yeah, we're good.
Okay. For some reason, it's not linking to that event. So what we might just quickly do is we'll resend out that quick link just to reconfirm with everyone. I think that's probably best.
Oh, so we have to do, it's a different link then?
And I think so. For some reason, it's not pointing to the original one. Given that we're 15 minutes over time, I think we just update the link.
Yep.
All right, I'm updating the link on our side for Nutrient Keto. That's been done, and I'll just bump that just to say link has been fixed.
Okay.
Oop, Marty's paused.
It's all right. Should I send the link to Rob?
Should you what, sorry?
Send the link to Rob?
Yeah, so that link I just sent out, it should be all good to go now. I'm following it and I can see us on YouTube.
Okay. It's too bad that it went to the other link, but okay. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, good. Oh, okay, I gotta turn this down.
I can hear you. Yeah, try rejoin.
I can't. Yeah. Okay, we got 5 people watching.
Excellent. There you go. So it's been updated and it's now working.
Okay.
Hello to the world. We're just waiting for Marty to come back. He's just had a short bit of technical issues.
Some technical difficulties, if you will. Classic.
And now he's back.
We're going live. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Welcome, Marty Kendall.
Great to chat to you again, Kella. You're so much fun,
Yeah,
hey?
for sure. Thanks so much for doing this, man.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Not a problem.
How have things been?
Yeah, really good, really busy, really living the dream, really. I don't know how just thinking this morning, I didn't really mean to fall into all this stuff. I just stumbled across some ideas and fell down a rabbit hole, basically. So, yeah, it's been a bit of a journey over the last 4 years, but here we are, and chatting to you in, Toronto, isn't it? And Canberra, and
That's the one.
Brisbane, yeah.
So it's actually...
domination.
Sorry, go.
I was saying it's global domination.
It's actually really funny,
Global.
Marty, because I was actually talking to my dad about what we're doing, about a couple of different
Yeah.
things, and I actually mentioned just like in passing your name, and he's like, Marty Kendall. It's funny because he actually used to work with you up in Queensland when he lived up that way.
I know.
Yeah, so that's really quite a fascinating little chat I had with my old man.
Who's your dad?
Andrew Bruce.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
see, I see that face. You're kind of like, oh yeah, I definitely understand. I don't know what that is.
Embarrassing. I struggle to meld my professional and personal and hobby lives together.
But the reason I bring it up is I was actually telling him how you went from obviously where you are within IT as an engineer through to nutrition, and I was saying, obviously your Monica and her health issues. Yep. And how that essentially you're the modern day Romeo going through and just trying to re-change the nutritional landscape just to, in the pursuit of your wife's health. I thought that was brilliant.
It's a noble goal.
One of the best. So I'll hand back over to Kayla, who's just sitting there with his excellent beard as always.
Thank you. So yeah, Marty, I guess we probably have a lot of new viewers, and maybe you can give us a quick intro of who you are, where you come from, and basically why we're here today to talk about nutrient density and your app and challenge and everything like that.
Yeah, where I came from, interesting. All started. Yeah, as we were saying before, my wife Monica is a type 1 diabetic, and about way back we got our kids of 14 and 13, and as we started to go, hey, we want to get pregnant and have kids, it was like, okay, type 1 diabetes is a big deal to try and manage, and especially in pregnancy, and there's increased risks, and that made it all a whole lot more serious and took Monica's blood sugar control to being a bit of a pain in the butt to something we really wanted to nail. We found a doctor who was really helpful and just sort of started the journey from there into low carb, and then trying to manage insulin through pregnancy. And then, it's been an ongoing learning experience and delving into paleo and low carb and keto. And then about 4 years ago, I came across the insulin index and went digging and found some more data on that, and threw that into a spreadsheet and started analyzing that. And I thought, wow, this is really powerful to try and understand the insulin response to food. And from that started the Optimizing Nutrition blog, and then delved more into that and realized that really low insulin index foods were really high fat with low nutrient density. So I've been in the Rob Wolf, Matt Lalonde headspace looking at nutrient density. Thought maybe we can smash the two things together. So and then using multi-criteria analysis engineering approach, trying to say which foods have the lowest insulin response while being nutrient dense at the same time. And then sort of a year or two ago, came across the satiety at the same time. So, low carb foods are not necessarily satiating, and they help a lot of people stabilize the blood sugar and improve satiety. But the whole concept of fat to satiety I fell into and went down that rabbit hole, and ended up putting on a lot of weight trying to chase ketones. So I thought, this is really pissing me off. I want to understand why. Why I'm doing this, and I've been told that fat to satiety, just believe in it, just trust the process and keep on following it.
And just on that, how is that with Monica and with her type 1 diabetes and chasing that ketones and her body composition?
Yeah, well, she was never as much of a zealot as I was to try and chase ketones, probably wisely. We never really tracked ketones that much with her, which is probably a good thing in retrospect. But yeah, I was there believing that you just eat more butter and peanut butter and cheese, and I'll get higher ketones, and that'll lead me to lose weight. And then you look at the mirror and you step on the scale and saying, either my theory is wrong or I'm doing it wrong, or what is this? And it led me down the rabbit hole a little bit more. And then I developed a bit of a spreadsheet to try and develop reports for people to say, hey, based on your current diet, how do we optimize your micronutrient profile to improve that? And then Alex, my now nutrient optimizer partner, came along and said, hey, I can help you program that. And over the last 18 months or so, that's been just a labor of love, night and day, every moment. We're not sleeping and trying to do our day jobs, trying to develop the nutrient optimizer into what it has become now. Which has been completely fascinating. And he dug up this data on 500,000 MyFitnessPal users, and we were able to number crunch that to understand satiety better and the role of protein and fat and carbs and energy density. And then more recently, from the first Nutrient Optimizer Challenge, which was in January, we've been able to use that data to better understand the relationship of different micronutrients. So we're going to talk later about the protein leverage hypothesis, but there also seems to be a micronutrient leverage hypothesis, where if we get the micronutrients we need, we tend to be satisfied with less food. So that's where we're at, and it's been a totally fascinating journey, and I'm completely enamored with it, both because I'm selfish and I want to optimize my own health and my wife's health, but it's obviously a big issue out there, and people are really struggling to find clarity in what to eat, and there's so many different messages, and I suppose the bottom line is your diet doesn't need a belief system or a name like keto or vegan or paleo or whatever. It just needs nutrients, really. So how do you quantitatively say what foods do I need to eat that contain the nutrients I need to thrive? And I suppose the more recent thing is that those recommended daily intake to prevent deficiency, there's a massive difference. It's just mind-blowing, the difference between the amount of nutrients most people are getting and what it actually takes to, the people that are optimizing satiety and finding the hunger is smashed. Those people are getting a whole lot more nutrients in terms of nutrients per calorie. So that's the whole concept of nutrient density. And I'll stop ranting and let you guys.
Well, I like that. Essentially what you're saying is that there is more to, micronutrient intake rather than just, how much do I need to eat to not get a disease versus actually what is optimal for my body, optimizing nutrition. But what I find really fascinating with what you were saying was how your philosophy has changed from optimizing, what I would call broad spectrum health markers, insulin response to food and all of those kind of things, to more of a body composition perspective. You know what I mean? And I think that is actually backed by data, where if we improve body composition, it actually improves the health markers in themselves. And it's kind of like a chicken and an egg kind of situation.
Totally.
And what I really like about the way you're approaching this is that you're approaching this from an angle of satiety. The whole concept of that you're going to eat. You can eat something and you're going to eat until you're full at some point. You can be hungry for a period of time, but that's only going to be a short period. But if we can control your satiety, then we can control your intake. If we control your intake, then obviously we're controlling your composition and therefore your health. And I kind of like how you've changed that philosophy over time.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely been a learning experience from trying to focus on minimizing blood sugars and minimizing insulin. I suppose one thing I think a lot of people out there don't realize is that you've got a basal level of insulin that if you're, it's basically like a dam floodgate that holds back the fat and the protein in storage while you use up the food coming in through your mouth. And that basal insulin, which a type 1 diabetic has to inject every day. So I can see in Monica the basal versus bolus insulin for the food versus her body fat, keeping her body fat in storage. A lot of people say, well, if I just minimize the insulin response to food, everything will be wonderful. But really what you need to do is find a way to decrease the overall energy intake, so your basal and bolus insulin decrease at the same time. So yeah, and yeah, so to do that, you really need to have satiety, so you're eating less. And if you're going to eat less, you need to find a way to get the nutrients you need with less food. So hence nutrient density. And it's not just protein, carbs, potassium, whatever your favorite micronutrient today that the Instagram bloggers are going on about. It's the whole composition of all of those things, and particularly the ones that you're currently not getting enough of. So I suppose we've designed the system to say, let's look at what you're currently eating. If you're a carnivore, your nutrient deficiencies will be different to a plant-based vegan. Let's look at what you're not getting now. If you want to stick to that dietary template, if you're particularly attached to it for a philosophical or a digestive health reason, we can do that. But let's look at the foods that will help you optimize that further and move your health forward, and in an iterative sort of engineering optimization sort of manner.
Great. The drivers for satiety, you've always pushed the fact that it's a protein to energy ratio. And so,
I suppose that's been something that I've seen Ted Naiman rave on about, and I've said, well, let's take him at his word and see if it works. And in my life, it has, and it's had a really big impact over the last year. But yeah, there's more to it at the same time. I try. Ted's really good at saying, well, I understand the complexity, and I'm going to make amazing memes that explain the essence of that. But then I go into, let's unravel the entire spider's web and then try to put it back together. So I don't know. Maybe I'm better to.
And there's a bit to say. Sorry, I was going to say there's a bit to say about the science of what we're trying to do, and then the art of coaching someone into doing the science. And sometimes giving all of the information just creates like a paralysis by analysis. I think nerds like us, we're just like, we pull it apart, we don't understand the system and kind of like play with it. What I mean? Like, what happens if I move this part? But for other people who maybe don't have that quite same level of passion as we do, it becomes almost like, okay, this is too hard, I'm just not going to eat carbs. It's like, well, steady on, like that's not really the right solution. But like you, I've kind of gone down the protein energy ratio rabbit hole as well. And like you, I've had outstanding body composition effects from it. And I know I've spoken to you about this before, but I'd love to get your ideas on the ideal protein to energy ratio that you would have for someone who is trying to improve their body composition versus in an ad lib intake kind of setting.
Yeah, I suppose the recent analysis and the MyFitnessPal analysis basically says that the higher you can get your percentage of energy from protein, the more satiating that becomes. So the lower your appetite goes, and the more you get to a point where you're not as interested in food. But conversely, the major driver in the other direction is that combination of fat and carbs together, that if you're talking don't eat for winter, that really drives it's autumn and winter's coming, and it stimulates your appetite, and it seems to upregulate your set point, and your body's saying just eat because winter's coming, eat everything you can find, and your appetite goes through the roof. So really the bottom line is to try and manipulate that ratio as much as you reasonably can while still getting enough micronutrients. And if you go too far in that really, really high satiety direction, you can miss out on some micronutrients, although overall a high protein diet tends to be very micronutrient dense at the same time. Like if you go really, really high satiety, like I was doing some analysis this morning, and you end up pushing out all choline from your diet because you're not eating any egg yolks because they're too high fat. So you have to find that balance point. But I don't really, like, I know Ted loves the protein to energy ratio, but I don't tend to think in that, so I can't really name any ratios. But I mean, the average percentage intake is around 13 to 16% of energy from protein. If you look at the nutrient optimizer people that are trying to optimize their diet, so far the average is like 28%. I've sort of set a bit of a stretch target that if you can push it to 40% of your energy intake from protein, you'll probably get a pretty good result. But then we were chatting on Facebook, and you've got Lyle McDonald and the Protein Sparing Modified Fast and really hardcore bodybuilder types. They're pushing for 4.4 grams per kilo lean body mass, and I think you can digest like up to 4.5 grams per kilo body weight, which is a massive amount of protein. And for me to actually consume that much protein, that would be my entire energy intake for the day if I could only eat protein. But there's no food that is only protein, so you've got to find that balance point of pushing your protein to energy ratio as high as you can while still not over consuming energy in total. So then it becomes a matter of saying what are the foods that maximize that protein to energy ratio while still getting nutrients. So that's where the whole kangaroo and protein powder and whatever you can get, ostrich and emu and every amazing food that you see Cal trying to maximize is and buying obscure foods that are amazing. I love his Instagram, but that's where that food selection becomes really hard. And in our modern day environment, like you walk around and everybody's offering you, have some Easter eggs and have everybody's just chowing down the cookies on the bench at work, and it's really hard practically to avoid those foods in our current environment because they're so cheap and hyper palatable, and everybody's doing it.
And I think it's spot on. For example, like a 4.4 grams per kilogram lean body mass is actually my daily minimum. So
but you'd have to be very, very active to burn enough calories to maintain that, I would imagine. Is that right?
Well, no, not really. So, like, for example, I've got 140 pounds of lean body mass. So, for us, English-speaking people, that's about 62 kilos lean body mass. And, for me, that only works out at about 280 grams. So if you start eating in the PSMF range, 280 grams of protein is about 1.2 to 1.3 kilos of meat spread over like 2 or 3 meals. That's actually not. That's quite achievable. So, but I think you're spot on in the sense that there is, again, the difference between what might work and what people can actually follow long term. And the fact is, if I ask people, like, look, I just want you to eat egg whites and kangaroo mince 3 times a day, and I want you to have like 1.5 kilos like once every 6 hours, no one's going to do that. I get that, and that's okay. It's about what changes can we make right now that is going to have the greatest impact for the most amount of people. And I think that's where you're spot on with that. Try for 40%. I think 60% would be better, but try for 40% because no matter where you go, and that's what we're getting to, there isn't really an upper limit of protein intake as long as calories are controlled, where it's going to start having a detrimental effect.
Totally. I suppose try to, wherever you're at now, if you're going to tracking can be really useful for a period, limited value every day to manage everything. But, look at your current intake and say, what foods are giving me too much energy from fat and carbs, and what foods are giving me the protein I want? And how can I prioritize the high protein foods and continue to push out those those energy foods? And when it comes to you look at the thermic effect of food, you might be having 2,000 calories of protein if you could possibly get that in, but then due to the thermic effect of food, you lose 25% of that, so you're down at 1,500 calories. But the fact is, your body is built for survival, not to look good on a bodybuilding stage. So your body's going, give me the damn energy, give me the energy food. So it's a mental game continually. You have to win on a day in, day out basis to resist those high energy foods that we're surrounded with all the time. So
Absolutely.
and once you have a little bit, it's like once you pop, you just can't stop. You know, bet you can't just eat one. There's something in it that once you start down that road, like if you accidentally, have a cookie because you did heavy deadlifts at work at lunch, I find I come home and, the fridge looks really attractive. And it's like something I ate earlier in that day triggers a binge response later in the day that people say eat in moderation, but I don't think it works. Moderation sucks. But it's hard to be that disciplined in this current food environment. Everybody's got donuts. You have to live in the military and completely control your food environment to really make it work.
Well, as someone who's in the military, let me tell you firsthand that there is no control of your food intake. Let me tell you that. I'm actually dreading my next field exercise because I'm like, it's like 80% calories from carbohydrates. I'm like, this is not good for me.
Oh, wow.
But so, we're talking about the satiety effects of protein overfeeding. Do you think that there is a upper limit to that? And I preamble that question by saying that we were listening to Amber O'Hearn talk the other day, and she was, I love Amber.
That didn't make any sense to me at all. The chat with Tristan.
And they were talking about like the PSMF, and they were saying that how when they ate too high of a protein intake, they were ravenous, and it's like, well, of course you're it's like, of course you're ravenous, you're in a calorie deficit, hunger. Hunger is a side effect of dieting. Like, what do you think was going to happen?
Yep. Yeah, totally. That was my thought exactly. It's like, okay, I could only eat 1,000 calories for the day and my usual intake is 3,000. I was hungry. It's like,
yup.
Yeah.
Is there a problem?
That's how it works. You're in a deficit.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where you have to find your sweet spot of getting enough energy food into, like, if you can only eat 1,000 calories and you don't want to lose a massive amount of weight and you don't want to experience hunger, then maybe you, if you can only get in 1,000 calories of protein, then you need to eat enough energy food to make sure you're not hungry, but prioritize protein and then titrate that energy food to the point that you're not starving hungry.
And I think that actually, in a roundabout way, answers the protein to energy ratio question I posed you before, because essentially I found it's very individual. So I can eat lots of lean protein and feel very satiated, but I'm very active. So it's kind of it's like my body is happy with that intake versus other people. I find that if you push their protein up too high, exactly what it's saying, they end up under eating chronically and becomes like a health issue. So, in those people, a lower protein to energy ratio, but within their calorie limit is probably going to be more ideal.
Yeah. And that's where with the Nutrient Optimizer, we've got a smart macros algorithm that basically tracks your current intake and says, okay, you're not losing weight. Let's drop your overall calories back. But hey, you're losing too much muscle. Let's increase protein. So it dials those in progressively. And if you keep on following that, you'll get to a quite an extreme protein sparing modified fast. But if you're just starting out, then there's real benefit in starting A, from where you're currently at, and B, not plummeting your calorie intake from 5,000 calories a day to 1,000 calories a day, because you really want to eat as much as you can while losing weight at the same time. Otherwise, your metabolic rate will just plummet, and there's nowhere to go once you've maintained 1,000 calories for a while, because your body adapts to that.
So, in terms of protein overfeeding, just before we do move past protein, just because I love this topic, I was going to say I love protein, but Kayla would make a joke when I got off screen. So, in terms of body composition effects of protein overfeeding, have you seen anything to say that there is such a thing that is too much protein, or that, there is an optimal intake?
Basically, no. I sort of say if unless your nephrologist says that you shouldn't eat too much protein, then you're okay. And if you don't know what a nephrologist
is that a swipe at Jason Fung there?
Oh no, well, if you don't have a kidney specialist who's
Yeah.
got you on dialysis, then, and even if you do, then there's no issue with too much protein. And like maybe there are issues because your kidneys eliminate excess protein from your blood, but if you're not on dialysis, then it's unlikely to be an issue.
And do you have similar thoughts on effective protein on ketogenesis? So we're talking obviously before about its insulinemic effect. I think it's about, on the top of my head, like 56% of protein is insulinemic. So what are your thoughts on over-consuming protein for people who do want to be within keto for whatever silly reason that might be?
Yeah, I suppose my first gripe is that, do you want to be, they need to, like basal and bolus insulin, they need to understand the difference between endogenous and exogenous ketogenesis. So exogenous ketogenesis is where you're taking exogenous ketones or body or dietary fat in excess to your needs. So if you're pushing all this fat in, your blood ketones will rise, but who cares if you're not in an energy deficit? But if you're in an energy deficit, you'll have ketones coming from your body fat, and you'll be laughing. And that's what most people want. Most people want to be having ketones from their own body fat. But let's not chase ketones for the sake of ketones. And definitely over the longer term, you see even in the Verta studies after 6 weeks, they had blood ketones elevated from like 0.3 up to 0.6, and then came back after 12 months. And then after 2 years, they were back down at, I think it was 0.38 after 1 and 2 years. And we saw a similar thing in our nutrient optimizer challenge, that ketones rise after a few weeks of weight loss and then continue to drop over a longer period, even while people are losing body fat. And the healthiest people seem to have the lowest ketones, and having a lot of energy circulating in your blood, whether it be from high cholesterol, triglycerides, high blood sugar, or high blood ketones, none of those things are good, because it means that you're not effectively storing body fat or energy in your body fat where it's meant to be stored.
Yeah, or you're able to clear
so
energy
the bottom line
substrates from
is
your blood.
protein.
Sorry.
Yeah, protein promotes satiety, which will then promote an energy deficit, which will promote endogenous ketogenesis, which is your body fat being used for fuel. So that's really the win that you're looking for, without having to chase numbers on a ketone meter, which can be quite distracting and confusing.
I actually, just up in the background, I've placed a really fascinating graph, just so it's a bit more visual for those who are watching. And what we've actually done is they've plotted the protein intake versus beta-hydroxybutyrate concentrations in serum. And although there's a lot of scatter with the data there, but what you can actually see is there's actually a correlative increase on BHB concentrations with increased protein, which is fascinating, because people tell you, that GNG will throw you out of ketosis, essentially. But what we're actually seeing is increased protein increases your ketone concentration, if that was actually important to you. So that I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, from my diabetes headspace, I know that if you're injecting insulin, you'll need to inject more insulin over the short term due to protein compared to fat. And so insulin, if you're injecting insulin for protein, but overall, otherwise, it's a non-event, and you don't really need to worry about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to move past protein, as much as I do love talking about it. And let's just talk about nutrient density. So, I think you mentioned before, if you want to talk about it as a Venn diagram, and inside the whole circle, we might have satiety. I think protein's a pretty big part of that. But then outside of that as well is the nutrient density. And I think that's where you're kind of differentiating. So first question for you, and this is one that fascinates me. Do you think it's a lack of nutrients the drive hunger, so like a shortage? Or do you think it's the
Yep.
abundance of nutrients that potentially drives satiety?
Yeah, I don't know. Is the sort of on a scale? What do you think? Like you're going to need, you definitely have cravings, and different people have different cravings at different times for different things. And you hear pregnant women, in tribal cultures eat dirt, or they crave, women at different times crave chocolate, or when you've done a lot of workout, you need protein, and then maybe you need some extra carbs or whatever. Your body definitely has different cravings based on your current baseline diet and your current activity and current situation. So you definitely have cravings for micronutrients. I think the bottom line is that the current, I watched a video by Mark Schatzker, who wrote The Dorito Effect, the other day.
Great book, by the way.
Mind-blowing stuff. Love his work. I messaged him and said, love your work, keep it up. And he says he's got a new book coming out, which is really cool. But the idea that our food system has forsaken nutrients for the sake of quick energy production from fossil fuel for money, but our current food system is chronically depleted in nutrients, chronically too much energy, and our body's just going, well, I have to eat more and more food to get the nutrients I need, to get the protein, to get the calcium, potassium, folate, cholesterol, niacin, panto acid, B5, phosphorus, selenium, all those nutrients your body needs, and so many more that we don't quantify. Your body's going to give me the nutrients, and I just have to keep eating until I get enough of it. And all of a sudden you're going, wow, I'm massively obese. So it's not really a surprise.
I'm trying to bring Taylor back in. He dropped out a little while ago. So I'm waving the flag in the meantime until he does. But so the reason I asked that, and it seems like a bit of a splitting hairs question, but it does actually have implications. So for example, I know you've done some outstanding work, which we'll get to very shortly, about what was the optimum intake for various micronutrients for people to lose the most amount of weight. But when you really think about it, is it a case of, do I just have to hit a minimum, and in which case I'm satiated? Or is it a case of that I should just continually keep pushing that boundary the same way that you might with protein, where more is always better? So I think that'd be a fascinating question to understand.
No. If you frame it that way, I suppose with protein, the more you prioritize protein in percentage terms, the more satiety response you get. And it seems to be a similar trend with all those other nutrients I mentioned. So we took the nutrient optimizer data, every 25,000 days, 8,000 people logged, and uploaded the data to Nutrient Optimizer, and it went, hey, this is so good. Finally got the data to say what is the satiety response to different micronutrients. And it's definitely like the recommended daily intake is way down on the left, and the optimum intake just keeps on going. So many, potassium particularly is a massive driver for satiety. Folate, cholesterol seems to, once you get to about 1.5 grams per 2,000 calories, tends to plateau out. Niacin tends to plateau out once you get a good amount, but it's definitely the amount where we tend to go, okay, I've had enough, I'm going to down-regulate my appetite, seems to be way above that recommended daily intake, or the estimated average requirement, or
so just bringing that on for a second. You mentioned potassium. Now that actually fascinates me, because I would have thought sodium potentially, and even to a lesser degree magnesium would have been a bigger driver for satiety. So I find it really interesting that it's actually potassium, especially considering that potassium tends to be relatively deficient within a ketogenic diet unless you supplement. But we still see a increased satiety effect people on a ketogenic diet anyway. So I find it really fascinating. What kind of gram level intakes would you be suggesting to maximize satiety, not for RDIs?
I suppose on that, like we said before, it depends on your current context and who you are and what your current diet is. And like you said, a lot of people on a ketogenic diet tend to cut out all plant-based foods, which is often a lot of green leafy veggies, which contain a lot of those minerals, and a lot of them aren't eating a lot of organ meats or shellfish and the like, which contain those micronutrients that tend to be also contained in the plant-based foods. So potassium seemed to be the number one micronutrient that tended to promote greater satiety in this population based on the data. The recommended daily intake is 3.8 grams per day for men, which most people go, how the hell do I meet that with my ketogenic diet? I can't eat that much spinach. It is often the response. But I mean, we tended to see improved results up to 6, 8, 10 grams of potassium, which is what they talk about the hunter-gatherers getting. But just people, it just continued to be a linear improvement in satiety once people got more and more and more of that. And then you say, well, can I supplement that? And I don't think you can, because I just don't think that maybe supplementing potassium can help. And a lot of people I know have experienced improvements in potassium, but then you've got the sodium potassium ratio and all the absorption issues in your gut. And if you're dumping a whole lot of potassium into your gut, and you're probably going to get diarrhea from that, and it's a completely different scenario and absorption arrangement to what you get from
just to quantify, when you say
food that's grown on.
Go on. Just to quantify what you're saying, when you say supplement, are you talking about a potassium supplement in the terms of like a pill form?
Yes.
Or would you be saying supplementation and say something like, light salt or hard salt or new salt?
Yeah. Well, I suppose there's a number of ways of supplementing potassium, because potassium, if you're on a heart medication, if you start dumping in a whole lot of potassium into your system, it can have a major effect. So potassium supplements in pill form are limited to 99 milligrams compared to the RDI of 3.8 grams. So you need to eat 40 pills to get your daily intake, which is still deficient. So to get around that, you can use potassium citrate powder or light salt or other things like that. And sure, if I sometimes use a potassium coffee, and you've got some caramel syrup, which takes away the taste, and and it tastes okay, and it's quite.
Why would you want to
nice,
do that?
But it's a bit
nice black and salty.
But it's a different taste, but it tastes okay if you find the right dose. But I think primarily trying to find your micronutrient intake from whole food as a first point of call is definitely a higher priority. But back to what you were saying before, there is a limitation where you get so much nutrient density in a food that your appetite will shut down. So if you're doing a massive amount of exercise, or you're actually lean and trying to bulk and grow and build muscle, and you've got nutrient density tweaked so high that you can't get in all the food you're eating, because a nutrient dense diet tends to be quite low energy density as well. So you're eating a lot of food. There's a balance point, and like anything, there's a balance point between the extremes, and you need to, like if you're obese, you need to lose weight, then you need to push in one direction. But if you're trying to bulk and gain weight and do a lot of activity, then you'll probably need to monitor and push in the other direction. But whichever way you're going, you're going to be doing better if you can maximize the nutrient density of your diet.
Absolutely.
While still getting enough energy in. So,
just before we move on to energy density, so again, another fascinating topic, but I think just kind of summarizing what you're saying is this, like, if for whatever reason, say a carnivore or something like that, you couldn't get in sufficient potassium through green leafy vegetables, avocado, cocoa, the things like that, then sure, absolutely using new salt, or even potentially, 40 pills if you want to go that route. Every day is a solution, and would help you obviously eat less. If you want to eat more, then potentially not chasing potassium, so less. Well, actually, avocado probably be good because of energy density, but things like that might be ideal instead.
Yep.
But coming across through to energy density, I've read quite a number of studies that more or less say that regardless of the food that we're eating, we eat about the same weight. So for most people, that ends up being about 1.4 to 1.6 kilos of food a day.
Yep.
So do you think that that is the driver for why fiber is satiating?
Fiber, yeah. I'm not particularly passionate about meeting a minimum fiber requirement, but I think foods that contain micronutrients tend to be higher fiber containing. Digging up an analysis that I did this morning after you made a comment in my Google Doc that we're talking a lot about at the moment, crunched some numbers based on the nutrient optimizer data, and once we get over about 2 kilograms of food per 2,000 calories, we start to get an improved satiety response. So as you move from, let's say you're eating, 103% of your BMR at 2 kilograms of food a day, if you could push that up to 6,000 grams or 6 kilograms with 2,000 calories, which is way up the far extreme, you'd drop your energy intake by about 25%. So the lower energy density you can make your food, the beyond about 2 kilos a day, the better satiety response. So that's basically more fiber, more water, less fat, less processed carbohydrates, which, but there's definitely a sort of a linear response. Yeah, and it comes back to protein energy ratio again as the basic metric. But I suppose I'm trying to fine tune and understand all the different facets and factors that we can stick together to get a more accurate satiety index than just protein to energy ratio. But
yeah, absolutely,
it's a pretty good place to start.
It is. It's a big part of the puzzle, but it's only a part, And I think you're spot on. So I'm not actually a big believer in fiber specifically. I think fiber has been shown to be correlatively improve with some health markers, but then at other times I also know that a lack of fiber in a diet can actually be just as beneficial for other people, particularly if you've got like gastric issues or things like that. So I think the key takeaway is that it's actually not the fiber that potentially is of what's affecting people. It's the fact that you're natural. When you eat fiber as food, you have a lower energy density in your diet. You tend to have a higher micronutrient density. You have a lower, a higher protein intake. And it's those things that are potentially increasing it, not the fiber itself.
Yep. Definitely. And some people definitely have issues with too much fiber, and that's where they end up going to a carnivore diet and feeling miraculous results. But I don't think everybody is up that end of the spectrum that needs to go to that extreme. But if you are, then more power to you, and definitely if it works for you, then go for it.
So moving on to the next topic in satiety, meal frequency. This is something I'm actually really passionate about. And you did some outstanding work on your blog using that MyFitnessPal data about meal frequency. So what were your
You've probably
thoughts?
got my pictures.
I do. let me do that right now. So boom, there you go. Meal frequency. So this is how many meals per day.
It's a really great opportunity to answer all these questions that we're always wonder and talk about on online and all those blogs and discussion. It's like, okay, what does the data tell us? And we said, okay, what can we tell from the data about how many meals a day will help you to maximize satiety and minimize your overall intake? So you see on the vertical axis, you've got the amount of we could track in the MyFitnessPal data the amount of calories they had per day and their goal intake, which is usually for people using MyFitnessPal maybe 15% below their basal metabolic rate. So comparing it based on that gives you an idea of how much they were eating versus how much they wanted to eat. So as you can see from that data, 1 meal a day actually seems to be less effective in managing intake compared to 2 meals a day. Just go back to that first one.
No problem.
So 2 meals a day, I think, just helps you get enough protein and a reasonable energy density. But if you just say, well, I've got 2 hours to eat all my calories in for the whole day. I reach for the peanut butter and cream and whatever can make me feel good immediately.
Yeah.
And seriously, like that's when I was trying a lot of fasting. I'd go, geez, I've been so good. I haven't eaten for 2 days, and but where'd the cream and peanut butter go? Why is the bottom there so soon? And they're the sort of food choices you make at that point in time when your body says, congratulations, you've done a great job. You really deserve this. And your reptilian brain is so powerful.
Absolutely.
To override any intellectual, if anybody's got any, should be able to limit their calorie intake based on their mental power, it should be me, because of how much time I spend looking at this stupid data. But I haven't got a chance. My reptilian brain is, very powerful when it comes to peanut butter and cream and not eating for a while.
I love that you keep bragging on peanut butter, just because, like, between me and you, it's pretty much my trigger food. So this is getting a little real for me right now.
Totally. I'm a sucker for peanut butter, and that, like, I've been over the last couple of months been sort of in a bulking phase, and it's been good to be able to eat the peanut butter and the Greek yogurt again and get that energy back in when you're like we were talking about. There's a limit. I can't just eat celery and spinach and kangaroo only, because if you're trying to grow and get bigger muscles, then that's just not going to cut it. But as you can see on the chart there, if you're eating 5, 6, 7 meals a day, you're going to get to a point where just trying to moderate 6 times a day is going to be really hard. So I think that 2 meals a day tends to be a nice balance point if you're trying to lose weight.
And again, it's a spectrum, I think, because exactly what you're saying before, that there are a difference in goals, and if you are trying to gain weight, then an increased meal frequency is actually probably going to be better for you to getting the total caloric intake in. And same as more frequent feedings is probably more beneficial for muscle protein synthesis. But on the other side of the spectrum, if you're trying to lose weight, then a lower meal frequency, larger meals less often, is probably more ideal. And the research also says that eating less often isn't actually going to result in increased muscle protein breakdown. So, I don't think we should get caught up in exactly what you say before, any one main diet, whether that's keto or intermittent fasting or anything else like that. There is a series of tools that we have, and it's just selecting the right tool for the right job at the right time.
Yeah. And that's the ongoing challenge with the nutrient optimizer, and where my partner Alex comes in really nicely, is that he's always trying to bring it back to something usable and as simple as possible without being too simple, and trying to make it go, how can we make this work for more people more easily?
So
in the nutrient optimizer platform.
This is a question from Kayla. He'd like to know, for those of us who are in a bulking phase and trying to gain muscle, how could we use nutrient density as a leverage to actually achieve that goal? So we want improved body composition, but we still want to focus on nutrient density.
Kayla is amazing, because I'm here I'm 95 kilos at the moment, and if I'm trying to lose weight, I'm down at 1,500 calories or whatever to move the needle, and he's there trying to bulk on 6,000 calories, and it's like, wow, how are people so different? It's just incredible.
It blows my. I'm the same as you. I practically have to chain myself away from the fridge to see that needle move.
But he's got the opposite problem, that he has to eat more to get bigger, and he's really trying to get bigger. So you can, and that's where the system prioritizes nutrient density as the first priority, but then you can manipulate energy density. So if you're trying to lose that weight, you want a lower energy density. But if you want to gain weight or support a lot of activity, you're an athlete, you're bulking, you need more a higher energy density. So you're sort of moving the needle in the other direction. So we can quantitatively look at nutrient density and energy density and move that in the direction you want to get the result you want. And that ends up being the more energy you're intaking, the more likely you are to get enough micronutrients in your diet. So if you're just eating more energy, nutrient density is definitely still a priority. And I don't know if I'm quite on board with the junk cereal carbs, and I know Cal has moved on from the backloading thing to using starchy vegetables, which is probably a better idea. But I know Lewis Vilson just says most people aren't doing serious enough activity to warrant that sort of carb backloading thing. Most people just need to maintain a long-term energy deficit in a way that's satiating and consistent.
I've got to be really careful with this because I know Kayla would want to talk about this, and if I don't represent him properly on this one, like I will hear about this. But we're totally on board. So, for example, if I was to look at the spectrum, I think for the most people, a standard ketogenic diet, not that is the goal, but a nutrient-dense diet which naturally becomes ketogenic is probably best for the 99% of people, regardless of goals. When you set calories, I think to summarize, Ted Neiman does a really good analogy where it's like, well, if you're building up a callus, do you change your diet to get a thicker callus? No, your body will tell you what you need to eat, and I kind of feel like that's very valid. But at the same time, for those of us who are in that 1%, that extreme physique culture, there are definitely some benefit to be gained from utilizing insulin for what it can do for us in maximizing that muscle gain. But exactly like Louis says, is that unless you really understand the levers that you're pulling here, you're actually at a much greater risk of doing damage to your physique than you are in actually making a positive change, which is exactly why I would tend to say the same. The things that, like, whilst you can carb up using things like cereals and those terrible foods, in my opinion, I think you'd be better off potentially not doing that unless you are in that 1%. And even then, do you want to go for foods that are just pure energy and don't provide a nutrient, or would you prefer to have something that is both nutrient dense and energy dense?
Yep.
How do you
definitely
optimize?
Ideal to have the nutrients. Yeah, definitely ideal if you can. But I suppose if you are in that extreme athlete end of the spectrum, it's hard. It becomes harder to get enough energy in with a highly nutrient dense diet because there just aren't foods in nature that have that energy density. And I suppose you could argue that, in nature we didn't, before the invention of steroids and whatever, we couldn't require that much energy. We couldn't do that much activity to be that jacked, to be burning 6,000 or 7,000 calories a day. I don't know. Is there a there's a limit there. I don't know where that limit is, but
there's just on that.
You don't see the Kalahari Bushmen doing a massive amount of activity.
Well, actually, just on that, I actually read something really fascinating where they looked at the energy intake of hunter-gatherer societies, and they particularly looked at Inuits and also American Indians. And what they were essentially saying is that hunting males, so people who go out and they were looking for animal foods, they were burning on particularly about anywhere from about 5.5 through to about 6,500 calories per day if they were chasing big game. Like if you consider that we were pursuit hunters, so we would chase down prey and literally to the point where they're like, you know what, fuck this, I'd rather die. I don't want to run anymore. That's me. I'm like, first K, I'm like, I'm done. Just kill me now. So, when you look at all of those, we probably were very energy constrained in our diets, where we had huge energy requirements, but that's why we had that drive for fat. But now when we're sitting in front of a computer having these fascinating conversations day in, day out, we're not burning the energy, so we don't need it.
Yeah. People say, oh, we used to go for the fattiest cuts of the meat. It's like, yeah, because you were burning 4,000 to 7,000 calories a day. But, do you do that with your fingers?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a lot of typing. But so
I'm really fast.
So we talked before, obviously, about meal frequency. We kind of settled on the fact that 2 meals was ideal. But I also know that you kind of you didn't stop there. You started wondering, well, what was the best meals to be eating? Do you want to talk to me about that?
Oh, wow. I suppose just going back to it, if we can use the same philosophy with nutrient density to meals as well. So you can apply the same technology with, we've imported about 1,200 different meals into Chronometer. at the moment, and then rank them and put them back into the nutrient optimizer, so it can sort of say, rather than just giving you a massive list of foods which don't mean a lot to a lot of people, especially when it's, turkey gizzard and blue crab. People go, well, what do I make with that? Give me a recipe. So we've tried to analyze the meals and recipes we can eat. But the graphic you've got up, which I should have segued to, talks about which meals in the day we should be eating, which tends to be that breakfast and lunch, which is early time restricted feeding, and that's a real challenge if you've got a family and you like to eat meals with your family, and eating can be a social thing. But there's definitely something to be said for having an off switch at the end of the day, whether that be at 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. or 8 p.m., depending on when you go to bed. If you sit down in front of the TV and then you start getting the Doritos and whatever and just keep going to the fridge, people just, that Satch and Panda work, keep on eating around the clock, basically, other than the 5 hours they're sleeping a day. So it definitely helps to limit the amount of time you're eating, to just have a hard stop. And it seems to be better, definitely, to have higher protein feeding earlier in the day to start your circadian rhythm. I know people definitely argue against that, especially if you like having just coffee for breakfast. And even Ted says, best breakfast is black coffee. And if that works, then go for it. But this data from MyFitnessPal stuff and a lot of other more recent work indicates that an early time restricted feeding approach will work. And definitely, if we've got another article coming out looking at data-driven fasting and just saying, well, am I losing the weight I want to? If not, then skip dinner. If not, then stop eating 2 hours earlier. And a lot of people think, fasting is magic, but it can be a great way to just bookend your day and say, I'm going to stop eating then, and I'm not losing the weight. I don't want to count calories. Well, let's just stop eating a bit earlier or skip a meal. And
the science says that having a hard stop when people fast, they don't tend to make up the calorie difference later in the day. They don't compensate for it. But also looking at that graphic, and I'll just bring that back up again. Looking at this graphic, you can actually see that there is a 13% difference between whether or not you choose to have breakfast and an early dinner, or if you want to have dinner and breakfast, and that large gap in between. So I
haven't made a big deal of that differential, but it is a massive differential between
13%. Like if your goal is 2,000 calories, so that's staring down the barrel of 250 odd calories difference per day, just from choosing to have breakfast and an early dinner, or lunch or late lunch or whatever. That's half a pound or a quarter of a kilo of weight just by eating a little bit earlier. That's incredible. And I think this is an excerpt from some of the work Satch and Panda has done, where he's looking at ERTF versus like a controlled diet. And I think the control in this one was 12 hours eating versus 6. So there was a bit of a compounding factor there. But what we were essentially saying is that eating earlier was correlated quite positively to a reduced intake, which is fascinating because the work that you did is a great way of actually showing that, the science of what one side is saying says one thing, but when we look at the data, it actually says the same thing. That's actually very rare within nutritional science, where we actually have to say both the science and actually, correlate. And I think a lot of people, they say things like, oh, well, I can't skip dinner, I'll be hungry. And I find this is something from Bill, who I'm a big fan of, and I actually follow him on Patreon. But he says here that it took people 12 days of skipping dinner before they actually started to feel satiated on it. So if people are trying to lose weight, would you suggest that an earlier dinner versus people who are trying to gain weight and potentially eating later in the evening would be the ideal solution?
Yeah, definitely. And front loading your breakfast with protein. So what I've done is tried to wake up and have, my favorite go-to is kangaroo, just because it's such a high protein to energy ratio. Have two or three of the kangaroo. Yeah, 2 or 3 of those patties and spinach or whatever else I want to throw on it, and try to max out my protein at breakfast, is probably the most important thing you could probably do.
So moving on with that one, I think Ted Naiman was the one who said it first, where you decide what to eat and your body decides how much. And I think that really resonates with a lot of people. And I think,
Definitely.
again, it highlights just how great Ted is at summarizing key ideas. But I wanted to talk about palatability and its effect on intake. So what are your thoughts on increasing food palatability? So through, things like, increased sodium or potassium, flavorings, nightshades like sauces and chilies, as a way of increasing, how much you can eat versus maybe lowering palatability to reduce intake.
Yeah, I mean, our whole food system is set up to maximize palatability, so you'll eat more of the foods and buy more of the foods. So if you want to reverse engineer that, but it's amazing how, like, going back to that Mark Shatska video, I don't know whether you watched the recent one, but he went into the detail of how different flavors in our foods are due to our sense of smell and taste that correspond to the micronutrients in the food. And it's really fascinating. And if you hate the veggies you're eating, if you hate the meat you're eating, stop eating it. Go invest in some good quality fruit and veggies and good meat. And like, I really enjoy the kangaroo because I think it tastes really good. It's a different taste. But when we go to the markets and get, you meet the people that grew the fruit that they picked yesterday, you bring that home, you feed it to the family, and the kids are going, wow, this tastes amazing. I love this. I love this salmon, Mum. It's incredible. This salad is incredible. I love it. And my kids love good food. We love eating good food, but you can buy some really crap veggies that have been picked undergrown 6 months ago and stuck in storage and then, chemicaled up to make them look a bit green for sale. And it's a night and day. And food is meant to taste good. And I don't want to be saying, decrease the palatability, because nutrient-dense whole food tastes good if you get the right stuff.
Oh, and it's a resetting of your palate too. You know what I mean? Like if you're used to eating Doritos covered in artificial cheese, of course, some broccoli is going to taste terrible. But you know what? Get used to it and you can have some broccoli and it's going to taste amazing. So
totally.
There is a lot
I've got a friend in the group who fasted for 40 days, and one of the observations he made was that his palate sense of taste is extremely different now. Like the amount of what he can take. You can imagine if you hadn't eaten for 40 days, your body is primed to eat as much as you can. And I suppose that the way you've got to manage that, you look at Eric Helms. There's a video of him where he talks about after his first bodybuilding show, he got down to 5%, did really well, but then 2 or 3 months later, he was obese, literally, because his body just couldn't stop eating. And I suppose the last 10 years has been him trying to understand why he did that and systematize it for other people so he can help them, control their post-competition dieting. And there's definitely you've got to manage the palatability of what you're eating. If you get down to a low calorie intake, you've also got to manage the palatability. So the Twinkie diet will work if you can do it, but your body will just override that to the point of saying, give me some more food. But if you're eating the kangaroo egg white and spinach, then you're going to be going, don't love it as much as the Doritos and Twinkies, but I'm satisfied.
But I do love abs.
I'm not. Exactly. Make the choice. So does anybody say I love dying at 60 of dementia and diabetes? Probably not.
Exactly. And, I think, we'll come back to palatability in just a sec, but, I think this is really an important part to highlight for people who are dieting and a part of this, so that this is just a step along a journey. You know what I mean? And it's a long step. If you're obese, I hate to break it to you, buddy, but you'll be dieting for the next 12 to 18 months. But there will come a day when you're going to stop. And if you haven't learned a relationship with your food, whether that is going to the markets or, having that connection to what you're putting in your body, then you are going to be like the statistic where 83% of people end up gaining the weight back. And it's because you haven't put the tools in place to make this a lasting change. Yeah, sure, you're going to 7-Eleven doing a Twinkie diet, but what are you going to do when you are actually in a healthy weight range and you don't know how to eat properly anymore?
Yeah, totally.
Diet's
over, back to the Twinkies. You're screwed at that point.
So, Kayla wanted me to talk to you about sweeteners, in particular non-nutritive sweeteners in the context of a ketogenic diet or a nutrient-dense diet in particular.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts on using sweeteners, how they do affect the palatability of a food, and any potential health effects that they might have?
I don't really, to be honest, I don't have the data to say I have a unique insight into this, and I know there's a lot of argument about it, but if you're making fat bombs with a truckload of non-nutritive sweeteners that taste amazing, and your bulletproof coffee that tastes amazing with a whole lot of sweetener or whatever, if you combine energy dense food with a lot of sweetener, then it doesn't matter what the insulin effect is, it just tastes amazing and you're going to keep eating it. So who cares? It's not insulinogenic because it's the sweetener, it's the 3,000 calories of fat bombs you just took in that your body then says, well, I have to raise my insulin to stop my body fat and my protein being released into the bloodstream while I consume what you just gave me to eat. So it's not the insulin response to the sweetener, it's the insulin response to just the straight calories, because that fat will raise insulin.
And I think that's actually backed up by the science that I've managed to see, where essentially there wasn't a correlation either between any kind of health effect from an isocaloric diet with sweeteners. So the sweetener didn't have any effect. And people tended to not actually increase calories eating ad lib with sweeteners. So what the research was essentially saying is that if you enjoy it, eat it, it's not going to really have an effect either way. Soda, diet soda isn't going to kill you. But, in another way, what you're essentially saying is if you're going to approach a keto weight loss diet by making hyperpalatable foods that are easy to overconsume, you're probably dieting the wrong way.
Yeah, just taking a binge eating disorder and changing the name of it. And
exactly. So
you're worshipping and celebrating food in a whole different way. It's keto, but it's not going to help.
So you mentioned before, obviously, your document that I was very judiciously pulling apart and having a look at before, the nutrient leverage hypothesis. So your document's titled, "Is the nutrient leverage hypothesis really a thing?" Sell it to me. Tell me about the nutrient leverage hypothesis.
Oh, wow. I suppose the protein leverage hypothesis does seem to be a thing, and we see like we've talked about, a satiety response to more percentage of protein. But this data from the Nutrient Optimizer participants, 25,000 days, 8,000 people, we were able to not, in the MyFitnessPal data, all we had was the goal versus their actual intake. Now we've got their weight and their body fat and their daily calorie intake, so we can look at intake versus their basal metabolic rate to get a much better idea of the response to different foods and different nutrients in those foods. So and that's what I've been playing with over the last week while I'm not trying to get the challenge up and going. And we definitely saw energy density, the combination of fat and carbs together, and protein being massive drivers and probably greater. But then you've also got different micronutrients in order. You've got the list here: potassium, folate, cholesterol. Amazingly, there seems to be our body craves enough cholesterol, niacin, B5, phosphorus, selenium, magnesium, zinc. Fat, once you get above 60%, seems to have a negative impact on satiety. Sodium, once you get above 4 or 5 grams per day, you tend to decrease your appetite. Then further down, you get B2, calcium, iron, and sugar also has a vaguely negative impact, but compared to the other things, a lot smaller. For all the jumping up and down we do about sugar and fat, it seems to be those other nutrients that seem to drive hunger even more, which is amazing. And I suppose this is in a group of people that follow optimizing nutrition, which are likely to be a low carb group of people. But yeah, it's interesting that potassium, folate, cholesterol even seem to be big drivers of appetite, and people keep eating more until they get enough of those foods. And like we mentioned before, the recommended daily intake is down here, and the what seems to be the optimum intake is way up the other end of the scale. So it just tells me if you want to manage the obesity epidemic, you need to maximize nutrient density.
Mm-hmm. And I think you
my quest in life.
No. I think you really hit it. My follow-up question was actually going to be: is there a hierarchy of nutrient needs? But you've kind of already hit it. You're saying that potassium first, cholesterol from from the not chasing fat, but the fat that you would have in your meat anyway would be sufficient. And then you start looking at the B vitamins, which I think a lot of people are deficient in anyway. And we would really pull that down. You're essentially saying, lean meat and dark green vegetables.
Yep, and seafood.
And seafood, yeah, obviously, and or organ meats if that's something you're into.
Sure.
So
basically cuts out everything in our food system that's a combination of starch and vegetable oils, which just are dominating our food system more and more and more. So I think the whole obesity epidemic can really easily be explained by the propensity for, a food system is full of starch and vegetable oils that are cheap and hyper palatable and hyper flavored, and we need to avoid those and prioritize nutrients.
So we mentioned before, obviously, that we're all really saying the same thing. For example, me and Kayla, where we're talking from the Nutrient Keto, the way you're doing it with Optimum Nutrition, Ted Neiman, and we're all just trying to say the same message, said maybe a little bit differently, I think, to appeal to different audiences. Definitely. And from like our perspective, our heuristic, what we try to tell people is, eat lean meat, and we try to push like the protein to energy ratio for that guide. It's like a guide of what kind of foods to include. We talk about eating dark green veggies, which is fascinating because whilst I didn't know prior to talking to you, potentially it's the potassium in those dark green veggies that are really driving why what we say actually works. We talk about having a later breakfast, so an attempt to try and close your eating window and bring breakfast and lunch, or breakfast and dinner closer together, like based on your research from MyFitnessPal. And then having an early dinner to try and find like a medium ground between having a late versus early restricted feeding versus your your strategy where you're using chronometer and a lot of these like fascinating tools to be able to coach people into it. And you were talking before about how your tool adjusts over time based on goals, and that in my world we'd probably call that something like evidence-based practice. But can you talk to us about your tool specifically and how what you're doing is helping people achieve their goals and the results that your the nutrient optimizers have achieved?
Yep. Nutrient Optimizer, as I said, started out as a bit of a spreadsheet, a bit of a multi-criteria analysis that I could use to try and optimize my diet in Excel. And then Alex came along and said, hey, I can program that for you. And it's just become a snowball effect of how many different tools. And it's basically the Swiss Army knife of nutrition, but then an ongoing quest to make it work for people and find the most effective tools. Because some people want complexity, some people want to understand it, some people are trying to diet down to be on stage or to manage their diabetes or manage a chronic health condition, but some people just need a simple meal plan or a simple food list, and we're trying to tweak all the different elements to, and some people want to fast, and that works really well for some people if you can manage that time frequency. We're trying to build a tool that has all those different elements that are, if you've done one, you can move on to another different tool that might help you. And then once you've lost the weight, you can then maintain that weight for a while and then go into a bodybuilding phase or an athletic phase, and basically dial in your nutrient recommendations, your food recommendations, your meal recommendations to suit your current situation. So we launched the Nutrient Optimizer, which is a tool of all those different elements combined together into a systematized engineering type approach in January with a challenge, a weight loss challenge. And it was really amazing, like we've talked about today, the way that people just said, I came in to lose weight, but now I've started chasing it in chronometer to try and meet their micronutrient targets. And as they focused on chasing a nutrient-dense whole food diet, they said, "Hey, I'm not hungry anymore. I'm losing weight. I look good. I feel better, and their energy levels improved, and their it was really amazing to see how much the body fat dropped, and in all these people who had possibly been on a low-carb ketogenic diet, being worried about insulinogenic protein and trying to minimize protein in the keto scene to up their ketones, which just now is ludicrously stupid to me. And a lot of my blog is devoted to pointing out how ridiculously dumb that is. But these people who trusted the process and focused on food and meals that looked amazing and looked vibrantly beautiful and had plenty of protein and probably a higher protein to energy ratio, they actually gained lean muscle mass during that period over that 6 weeks, and while they lost a whole lot of fat at an amazing rate. Insulin dropped, blood sugars just plummeted. So it's just really, really exciting. And then the second challenge we're looking at, we just started yesterday Australian time, is a 4-week process where we take you through and say, let's look at your baseline diet. What are you eating now? And let's incrementally move you forward in a way that will build sustainable habits to add new meals, new foods, and try new things. And how does that affect your micronutrient profile? Just to let people focus on improving their micronutrient density. And then the third week is then doing meal planning and shopping. And then the fourth week is a competition where we've financially incentivized it. We've got nearly 500 people signed up for the challenge. We've got a prize pool of about 2.5. Yay! Lots of people want to win. Really interested to see how it actually goes. I've got about $2,500, which will be split across the top 5 people based on their final nutrient density score in that last week. So it'll be interesting to see the plant-based versus the carnivore versus the paleo versus the keto, and see which approach people can optimize their diet to get the micronutrients they need. And there's ongoing discussions about how much spinach can I reasonably eat. You've got Calla eating like 300 grams per meal, and everybody else saying, what about the oxalates, and I can't eat that. And it's fascinating the way different people solve the problem of nutrition, but this is a tool that enables you to do that without needing to stick into a silo of a particular named diet or belief system.
What I really love about it is, I suppose, 2 things. The first is that it adjusts over time. So people aren't hitting this roadblock that they don't know how to solve. And historically you'd go to a coach who would look at that and they'd do evidence-based practice, and they would, titrate your caloric intake and your protein up over time in order to keep pushing your body where you're going. But for a lot of people, actually, I'd say that's probably a bridge too far. Whereas where it's just a tool that says, all right, you didn't achieve it, let's bump these calories down a touch and see how you go next week. It's kind of like that continual coaching process. But the second thing I really love about it is that it's teaching sustainable habits. You're teaching people about this is what a meal looks like. This is what you should be eating long term. And when you said it before, when people were like, well, hang on a minute here, when I actually hit my micronutrient targets, I'm not hungry, and I'm actually hitting my calorie goals anyway. People are going to be like, well, fuck, why am I counting? Let's just get some micronutrients.
Exactly.
And
and we want to get people to the point where they don't need to count and don't need to track calories. But if you track micronutrients, then the calories sort of follow along. And sure, if you want to get down to 5% body fat and be a stage competitor, we've got that smart macros aspect that will say, okay, you ate 1,600 calories this week and you didn't lose your target weight of half a percent per week. Let's ratchet that down to 1,650, and your blood sugars are still high, so let's dial your carbs down a bit. And we can we can manage to that nth degree, and we've built a system that I think is better than anything else in the world that will help you do that in a systematized, strategic, long-term fashion. Because, like you said, it takes a year or 18 months to actually get where you want to go. But if you primarily focus on micronutrient density, so much of that other stuff just becomes a complete non-issue. So if you're eating the whole food, nutrient-dense foods that are good for you and look really healthy and vibrant, then a lot of those other things just fall into place and you don't have to worry about it. So hopefully, I'm really hoping that this nutrient density thing will be a big deal over the next few years. And as people learn to quantify the nutrient density, good things will happen, and we'll show. It's great to run these free challenges where people can, do it for themselves. And it's great to have 500 people involved in this one. And it's going to be great to have this amazing data set that says, look, if you just get the nutrients you need from food, all those other things work themselves out.
And to be honest with you, I'm really excited about this challenge. So I'm excited to see how the team goes. Definitely Team Nutrient Keto is going to take the flag, let's be honest here. But I realize that both of us probably talk all day about this because we're passionate and we're probably boring everyone else back at home. So I just wanted to, first of all, take the opportunity to really thank you for your time this morning. I think from our chat, some of the two big things that I've really taken away is that it's the chasing of the micronutrients that tends to drive the satiety. And it's not so much just the protein like I thought through primarily prior to chatting to you, but even more so in particular, that hierarchy of nutrient needs, particularly potassium, that one really fascinated me. So I wanted to thank you for A, getting this data, pulling it apart, but B, taking the time to chat to us about it today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
No problem. Thanks, Marty. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.